Thanks for joining us on today's webinar, Product Feeds Unleashed, Automating Your Ad Campaigns. My name is Brian Finnerty from Marin Software, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Feed optimization is a crucial aspect of running profitable search marketing programs. A single product title edit or image change can impact performance just as much as changing your bids. Advertising your products online is a complicated ecosystem that can be difficult to manage, but you can make substantial gains by taking a holistic approach and unifying product feeds across Google, Amazon, Facebook, and others. Today, we'll explore the intricacies of feed management with our three expert speakers. I'm delighted to be joined today by Andrew Todd, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Marin Software, Brian Roizen, Co-founder and Chief Architect at Feedonomics, and Emma Welcher, Social Media Manager at Hero Digital. Welcome all. A recording of today's webinar will be emailed to all attendees within 48 hours. We're going to start today with introductions from the three companies participating in the webinar and an overview of feed management. Then we're going to go into some campaign and feed management optimization details. And finally, we're going to bring the whole webinar together in a live Q&A. So now I'm going to hand things over to Andrew Todd from Marin Software, and he's going to kick things off.
Thanks, Brian. Marin is a leading provider of digital marketing software for performance-driven brands and agencies. Our platform, Marin One, bridges search, social, and e-commerce, which helps advertisers maximize the results of their overall overarching digital campaigns. It does this by integrating the right data, aligning efforts across channels, and amplifying the marketer's efforts with the latest in machine learning and automation. The result is a holistic view of your search, social, and e-commerce programs that delivers growth for your business. And over to Brian Roizen to introduce Feedonomics.
Thanks, Andrew. Feedonomics is a full-service feed platform that lets you easily optimize and list your products on hundreds of different advertising channels and marketplaces, including the three that we're going to talk about today: Google Shopping, Facebook Dynamic Product Ads, and Amazon. We help over 25% of the top 1,000 internet retailers optimize their product data. We can pull data from anywhere, including the most common e-commerce platforms like Shopify, Magento, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, and list your products anywhere. And now I'll hand it over to Emma.
Thanks, Brian. Hero Digital is the independent customer experience agency that grows brands through a relentless focus on the customer. We start with vision and turn it into reality, crafting iconic experiences, building customer loyalty, and delivering results. We're a trusted advisor to brands including Western Digital, Sephora, and Aramark.
Thanks, Emma. And now let's talk about some of the details around feed management and campaign optimization. So first, what is feed optimization? Feed optimization at a high level means ensuring that your data is clean, that you don't have rogue HTML sitting in there, you don't have missing values, and that you've correctly mapped to all the specifications of every channel you're trying to send your data to, whether it's Google or Facebook or Amazon. But the real heart of feed optimization transcends just being clean data and means ensuring that your data is relevant, meaning that your product titles and your other attributes are structured similar to the way that users actually search for them. So let's take a concrete example of that. Let's say that we want to start running, so we'll need to purchase running shoes. At the very beginning or the outset, we don't necessarily know what brand we want, what color we want, so our search term is going to be very general. It might just be something like literally the word running shoes. And after we do our research, we're going to find that we're going to narrow it down to a particular brand, color, and size, and our search term is going to change over time. So the more specific keywords that are in a search term, the more likely that someone is in that buying journey, and the more likely they're going to be to convert. So when we have a search term like Nike Air Max running shoes, size 12 black, there's a high likelihood that that user is going to convert. So we want to make sure that we add all the right keywords to make sure that one, we show up at all, and two, we show up for the minimum possible bid we need to. So let's imagine that we clicked on the first example, which was a link to Nike. It looks like Nike has a very different title on their website than what they have on the Google Shopping search results. And what's happening in between is feed optimization. Nike recognizes that in order to show up on that page, and they were showing up as the first result, they need to have the right keywords in the right places. And this is kind of what ensures that they're going to, one, surface at all in search results, and two, surface for the minimum amount they need to, because the last thing you want to do is overpay to show up inside of search results. Some of the common optimization issues, even after you get your feed ready and insert the right keywords, is making sure that it's actually optimized. Because we see literally thousands of feeds every single day, we have noticed that there are some problems that you see commonly across many of them. So what we've created is we've created FeedGrader, which looks at all of your different feed issues and attributes and gives you a score. But the score notwithstanding, it is very useful to see what the problem counts are. Do you have issues with rogue HTML in your title or description fields? Do you have issues where you have titles that might not contain really important keywords like brand, color, or size? Do you have duplicate titles? Do you have duplicate IDs, whitespace issues? So FeedGrader easily identifies these and gives you recommendations on how to actually resolve them to make sure that your product data, and especially your titles, are as optimized as possible. How about ongoing data issues? This is a really interesting one that we haven't seen any other feed platform address. What happens when new products are added to your feed? You can, of course, send them out to Google, but they may not be as optimized as they need to be. So what we've created is data governance. What data governance does is it ensures that as soon as changes are made that do not conform to rules that you can create, you'll immediately be alerted to them. And we've seen this save feeds multiple times. One that we saw relatively recently was on the actual price field. What might have happened if we didn't have this data governance alert is we would have sent out a feed with empty prices for every single product, which would of course purge and replace your previous feed and get your entire list and catalog disapproved. But with data governance, we're able to suppress that export and immediately get an alert so that we can look into what's causing that. And some of the other ones are, let's say that you decide to sell new products that you've never sold before. So if you add t-shirts and you don't have a categorization rule set up for t-shirts, one, your product type might get grouped into something too broad and your bids will be not particular to the right category. And the other one is your products might not be categorized at all. You might not have a rule set up at all to categorize into the t-shirt category for Google or any channel for that matter. So data governance allows you to create ongoing rules that will alert you as soon as any issue is found. And now I want to hand it over to Andrew, who's going to talk about the campaign optimization piece.
Cool, thanks, Brian. Now that we've seen what it takes to establish a high quality product feed, let's look at the next step, which is taking that product feed and building it into campaigns. A general rule of thumb when it comes to shopping campaigns specifically is to apply the 80-20 rule. Break out item ID product groups for the highest performing products, that's the 20%, and then use broader groupings like brand, category, custom labels, along with the catch-all to promote the remainder. Once you have that 80-20 system set up, it becomes very easy and the workflow is simple to extract or segment from that 80% into the 20 as you're constantly finding high performing products and breaking them out individually on an ongoing basis. Two, you have that 80% catch-all set up so that you maintain some level of coverage for every product that's shown in the catalog. It's a similar concept for keyword-based campaigns when you consider keyword and match type combinations like broad and phrase and exact. And as I keyed on, it's a structure that makes sense going forward and it makes for clean management. After you have those campaigns set up, the next step obviously is that you want to know how they perform. So advertisers want to be aggressive where they get the best returns and cut losses where they can on costly campaigns, keywords, and product groups. In terms of cutting losses, here you can see where applying a filter and quickly identifying keywords across multiple publisher accounts in one view is achieved, and then you could simply pause those or adjust the bids accordingly. In this case, we see keywords which have very high spend and little revenue attributed back to them. So we would argue these are candidates for pausing. As you're looking at performance, and this sort of ties back to the theme of this webinar, keep in mind that the changes can be driven by campaign side actions, such as bid changes, as well as changes in the product feed, such as an image change or a title difference. So campaign structure is complex and getting more sophisticated, especially as we look at Google, Facebook, and Amazon and the nuances between them. That doesn't change the fact that performance reporting is critical to understanding where your next ad dollar should be spent. Sometimes reporting on performance within the constraints of a campaign structure can be limiting and make it difficult to see the big picture. An example scenario is that you might want to see performance by brand, which isn't always available in native tools. Here's what that looks like. Despite the fact that New Balance ads exist in multiple campaigns across different publishers, we're still able to provide that aggregate view, which shows New Balance performance data as a brand in comparison with other brands sold by the same advertiser. When you do this, you can look at New Balance versus Reebok versus Converse and find interesting things. For example, interesting to us that the click-through rate for New Balance is double that of any other brand. That may indicate that this is the place we should allocate more investment and push more aggressively in these products and understand why these are doing so well in comparison. Again, this is just sort of a day-to-day practitioner view that will help determine where you should spend that next ad dollar. In addition to viewing or rolling up by brand, you may want to consider aggregating by category. For example, running shoes versus skate shoes versus basketball shoes, or sales status and price point, which we'll discuss in more detail later. And then lastly, with a sizable product catalog and its assigned campaigns, things can get complicated pretty quick, especially when you start to consider the minute bid calculations which need to be effectively applied to thousands or millions of ads every day. To answer for that, Facebook has bidding, Google has bidding, and Amazon just launched their solution, but that's really just the starting point. Where we see the best results is when you incorporate your own proprietary product information and contextual data into the bid calculations themselves. Algorithmic or AI-powered bidding is a powerful example where applying technology like Marin software to your advertising campaigns can produce massive time savings and performance results along with transparency, which is key. So you can leverage automation to take over the hundreds of thousands of daily and intraday calculations necessary to ensure your budgets are well spent and your KPI targets are attained. And also, as we hinted at earlier, it's all about bringing in the additional data. Letting the machine handle the minute calculations and then adding that human touch to it of whether a product is on sale or not, or whether there has been a price point change, inventory levels are decreasing, or stock has replenished, which goes hand in hand with the algorithm's calculation to get the most out of your ad spend. Great, so we've spent some time at a high level covering feed management and campaign management, sort of the overarching left-hand, right-hand activities of running a solid account. And now we just want to drill into a couple individual use cases across Google, Facebook, and Amazon. So I'm going to hand it back over to Brian, who's going to start us out with a discussion on a Google feed change.
Thanks, Andrew. The first one that I want to talk about is a really interesting one for Google Manufacturer Center. So this one is specific to brands and manufacturers that really own their own products and are not just resellers. And you may even have seen these results that are kind of grouped on the right-hand side. And you might be wondering, where does the product data come from? If there are 10 people selling the exact same product, where does that Dell XPS 139370, where's that actual product title coming from? Where are those images coming from? And if you scroll down, where are those descriptions and rich features coming from? So the answer is Google Manufacturer Center. Google has a Google Merchant Center, which applies to all sellers of products, but they have created a specific site where you can upload feeds if you are the manufacturer. And this is what gives you complete and unfettered control over your product data. Because even if there are dozens of people selling the exact same product, you get to control the title, the description, the features, and even the images that appear not just on Google Search, but also on Google Shopping tab. If you click to the Shopping tab, which we find that about 10% of people do, to further research items, it's really important to make sure that you take control over it. By doing so, you get access to some really rich features that Google is actually rolling out even now. They just added a feature description and a product detail to enhance your listings and give you even more prominent visibility, because you can also use those to add very, very rich keywords. For instance, for this laptop, you might want to add that it has a solid state drive or an SSD. You might want to add the capacity of it. You might want to add the RAM. And these are all rich keywords that you could, of course, put in your title, but you could also add to other fields like this product detail field. So it's incredibly important, if you are a manufacturer, to utilize this fully. There are a couple of really interesting things that you can do on the A/B testing side, and this one is for Google Shopping mostly, but you can use this for other channels as well. And we call it Feedtelligence. What Feedtelligence does is it closes the loop on what best practices are for feed optimization and looking at actual converted search terms. So this is a really interesting, insightful report that shows you side by side on a per SKU basis what your current feed titles are and what actual converted search terms are. And it highlights for you the words that might be missing in converted search terms that are not in your current feed titles. So let's take a look at the first example here, where we have a feed title that is Nike Air Jordan Keds size 10. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like it's a pretty well optimized title. It might be missing the color, for example, but that's a whole other matter. Let's look more at the product noun itself. We've chosen Keds, and that may be what Nike actually puts on their website. But it turns out that people are actually searching for this with a very different noun, which is basketball sneakers. And not only are they searching for it, they're actually converting for it. So this is a great example of a very interesting one to A/B test and see, is the performance going to be better or worse if we actually include different nouns, different adjectives, and different keywords. In some cases, Feedtelligence might actually identify words that weren't even in our current feed title and that we wouldn't have thought of adding until we see that converted search term data. Like the second and third example here, where we were missing the word V-neck, which is a very, very nice keyword, and it's a way that people commonly search for this dress. And similarly for the third one, we have the word backyard, which wasn't immediately apparent, but turns out this is, of course, a backyard fire pit, and that's how people search for it. The other interesting example for A/B testing is Facebook dynamic product ads. One of the most useful facets that you have to play around with is your title, but the other one, which is very visual, is your image. Facebook's specifications only allow you to submit square images though, which of course doesn't fit with a lot of categories where the images might be portrait or landscape. Like in fashion and apparel, it's very common to have pictures or images where the height is longer than the width. And when you send these pictures to Facebook, they'll usually have some weird padding that won't look right, or it won't take the full box of that square. So what we can do in Feedonomics is we can actually dynamically recognize the colors that are in the background and extend them and pad them to see if we can get better performance through A/B testing. And I'm going to hand it over to Andrew, who's going to talk about that more in depth, how that actually works.
Great. So as Brian alluded to, as you make changes in the feed, like adding an image overlay, you want to understand the effect of those changes. A collegiate way to do that would be to run an A/B test. Find out, does the product sell better with or without the overlay? Is adding color to the title, like Brian mentioned in an earlier slide, what's the resultant impact of that change? Is it better or worse off with brand in the title, yes or no? These are things that you can determine your test and your control group, make the change on the feed side, and then interpret the performance. So it's not always the easiest thing to do when we're talking about testing on a product feed because the variables are changed upstream within the feed itself, and then you have to interpret the performance results downstream in the campaigns. However, with this challenge, it introduces the opportunity to get creative in terms of what you are testing and what the product mix is that you want to test on. In the past, an example was working with the customer that sells laptops, and we helped run a test to determine whether or not the image of the laptop should be with the folded open screen or the closed screen. Determine your control and your test group, change half those products to use the open screen, half to use the close, run this for a period of time, and then look at click-through rate or conversion rate to determine, hey, the open screen performs 2x better than the closed, and then to reapply that open screen image to the rest that were the control. So there are a few different approaches depending on what you're using. Drafts and experiments in Google. Facebook has their testing environment as well. And if you're a Marin customer, we can automatically tell you which creatives are winners or losers based on criteria and confidence thresholds that you assign and can change at will. Okay, back to Brian to talk about one more example.
Thanks, Andrew. Amazon is definitely an exciting channel, and it's of course the marketplace of marketplaces with over 50% of product searches starting on Amazon. And I know I'm super guilty of it. So I want to take a look at some of the common feed issues that we see day in, day out. One of the most common one is where Amazon gives you errors for your products that disallow them from being listed at all, which of course is, not the worst case catastrophe, but it's not great because it means that some products, you're not only able to not list them on Amazon, but you're not able to advertise on them at all. So what we've built is we've built an automated Amazon error resolution dashboard where you can easily pull in Amazon errors back into Feedonomics. And in this easy to use interface, you can select, do I want to use Amazon's value, or do I want to override it with something else, or do I want to skip this? So in this interface here, you can see that the common ones that are issues are brand not matching. We might have Nike LLC, but Amazon expected value is Nike. Similarly, we might have a color that might be off, like we might have navy, but Amazon's expected value is blue. So in this easy to use dashboard, you can one by one select, do I want to override the value? Do I want to skip it? And it's a really nice way to have these overrides persist so that you can immediately update Amazon and resolve those errors and enable your products to get listed. This is something that most other feed platforms completely ignore, but we built this directly in so you can immediately resolve these issues that oftentimes might result in 10, 20, 30% of your products not even being eligible to be listed or even advertised. The other one is parent-child relationships. So anyone who has dealt with Amazon feeds knows that they're a little bit different than Google's. Whereas Google doesn't require you to submit a parent-level row, Amazon does. And this is a little bit tricky because most e-commerce platforms like Shopify or BigCommerce cannot natively pull parent-level rows out. So what we've created in Feedonomics is an easy way to automatically collapse rows into a parent or to produce a child level only feed. So we can easily conform to Amazon's feed specifications for parent level rows.
Great, thanks, Brian. So as errors in the feed are resolved and the product data is clean and steadily syncing without issue, then comes the opportunity to expand and really leverage what's in the feed. There's a relative treasure trove of data available for advertisers to consider and use in optimization efforts. If you can bring this data in, it will pay dividends. So you can do this with Google and its labels, and Marin has similar functionality that works across Google, Facebook, and Amazon to get the most out of your product data or contextual data. These things could include inventory levels, sales status, be it a yes or no, price change from one day to the next or week over week, and then to use those signals to automate actions with happen on each based on express logic you determine. So in the example below, we see a rule that's set up that says, Any product group that syncs through with an inventory that's less than 10 units automatically decrease the bid for that product 75%. So these rules run in the background on top of the algorithm, taking into consideration business information that may not be readily apparent to AI or machine learning. On days that the criteria is not met, it's back to the evergreen bid model and calculations that are happening based on your KPI targets. You can imagine another rule, which is sale value equals yes, boost bid 200%. So as your product data is syncing in, anytime a product syncs through with that sale equals yes, we automatically increase the bid to account for that. Let's drill into that example about the promotional calendar and the sale a little bit further. So here's how that looks illustrated. For example, a sale is going to affect performance before, during, and after its scheduled day or date. An algorithm isn't going to know that a sale is coming. It may be able to adjust quickly to the fact that a product is on sale, but likely, it takes some time to interpret that performance is changing and then to adjust bids accordingly. If you're able to provide that outside data and deliver it and make those changes happen more immediately, you reap the benefits of doing so. So you can do this manually by adjusting bids throughout that time to accommodate for the fluctuations, or lean in on automation like Marin to ingest your promotional calendar and apply those changes based on the rules that we looked at earlier on your behalf. Some other additional examples, sale data, but you may also look at weather data or TV ratings, poll numbers. Depending on the nature of your business, think about the outside data or contextual data that has an impact on it and what you may be able to do if you pull that in and use it for automation and bid adjustments. Great. So next we're going to hear from Emma Welcher, who's going to give a real-world example of what they're doing over at Hero Digital.
We onboarded Feedonomics right ahead of Black Friday 2017, which was an important quarter for our client. They helped us optimize our product feed and restructure our shopping campaigns to align with these feed updates. Once we launched those restructured shopping campaigns, we used Marin's ROAS automated bid strategy to scale growth of our e-commerce spend to over 250% growth year over year, while exceeding our clients' KPI targets during this important retail season. We were also able to work with them to set up an FTP to leverage dynamic ads on Facebook, which since launching, we have seen 100% improvement in ROAS for this channel. We look forward to leveraging Feedonomics and Marin to continue scaling our shopping campaigns, and we have been able to secure additional investment for 2019 due to past results and success.
Thanks for that, Emma. That was awesome. Let's just give a quick recap before we get into the Q&A. So as they say, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Imagine as we went through this webinar and this exercise of Brian managing the feed side and myself managing the campaigns, and the two of us having no communication with each other. You could see the pitfalls there where we're both sort of working on the same account and he's changing some things, I'm changing others, and neither one of us understands the impact of those changes. The more clearly the two of us communicate and the fewer obstacles or friction between us, the more effective we can be on the behalf of our brands. So the aim of this webinar was to present both feed and campaign management and to also put forth the benefits of thinking about these things holistically as opposed to independently. What are those benefits? Well, you can drive better performance with cohesive holistic management, with full performance view from the initial listing of a product to understanding how it performs, and then using that data to generate better results and progress going forward. Time savings. So save time leveraging automation, setting up alerts and triggers to flag things that could disrupt performance, resolve errors automatically, bring in as much dynamic product information down as possible to see in one place the most readily available data. For example, seeing a product's price point alongside its current conversion rate in search bid. Assess the impact of every change. We talked about this with A/B testing, but understand how a change in image impacts click-through rate or how a change in price point impacts conversion rate. Real-time optimizations, so as products go on sale or inventory stock fluctuates, automatically adjust bids based on what those changes are. Google, Amazon, Facebook, they won't advertise a product that is out of stock, but they will advertise products that have limited stock. And understanding at which point your stock is no longer competitive will improve efficiency and make the overall program run better. And lastly, scale. So scale is king when it comes to product catalogs that are in the hundreds of thousands or millions of products, and then compounded with the dozens or hundreds of exports, sending those products and advertising them across Google, Amazon, eBay, Shopify, etc. Leverage automation and platforms like Marin and Feedonomics to help you grow and scale those efforts across those channels without all the headaches that come along with it. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Brian Finnerty, and we're going to take some questions. Thanks, guys.
Excellent. Thanks for that insight into feed management, everybody. Now we're going to take some questions from the audience. We've quite a few questions in the queue. So I'll start with the first one. Why wouldn't I just be able to use the publisher tools for feed management? Aren't they good enough? I'll put that question to our three speakers. Who'd like to take that one?
I'll take it. Sounds like it's a good one. This is actually something we see happening quite often, where retailers might be sending their feeds directly from their e-commerce platform to Google Shopping with absolutely no changes in between. And there are several risks of it. The first one is mostly about relevancy. If you can't properly see your data, if you can't properly add the right keywords, you're going to be overpaying, or you're not going to be showing up at all. So that's the primary one, but the secondary one is checking your actual Merchant Center accounts or your Seller Central accounts. Unless you're prepared to do that multiple times per day, it's really useful to rely on alerts with some kind of an error threshold for your feed, which is what we have in a platform like Feedonomics. So those are the two biggest ones that I see.
Great, thanks, Brian. Second question we have here is, where can I pull my product feed from? Are there any restrictions on the number of data feeds that we can use as an advertiser?
I'll try to take this one as well. So in Feedonomics, we've created API endpoints with dozens of the most common e-commerce platforms, from Magento to Shopify to Salesforce Commerce Cloud, even to custom ones. So if you have a very custom website that was built 10 or 15 years ago and you have absolutely zero ability to create a feed, we can actually dynamically crawl your website to create a dynamic feed that we can then send to Google, to Facebook, to anywhere where you need to send it to. And in terms of restrictions, we actually have clients with millions and even tens of millions of products in their feeds. So there really aren't any limitations. We've created it to be very, very scalable. And I know on the Marin side, it's just as scalable on the campaign side as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And something that we see occasionally is people who actually supplant their feeds with additional feeds. So where you may take a product feed for tickets to baseball games, if you're selling tickets, you're the MLB, and you have a weather feed that's added on top of that. So you want to bid down on the ticket sales for a game that the likelihood of precipitation is higher than 80%. Then you're taking not only your feed of the tickets and the different geos, but also aggregating it with a weather feed and using those two to speak together, and then have the outcome be like a bid up or down based on weather conditions.
Excellent, great answers. Thanks, Brian and Andrew. Next question, any tips for setting up and optimizing feeds so that they match user searches and perform well overall?
Yeah, definitely. I think at the highest level, keeping it simple is a good start. So trying to understand, how are users currently searching for products? Are they including your brands, product nouns, descriptive adjectives, and trying to structure your product data, especially your title, the exact same way. The other one I would say is just making sure you categorize products properly, because oftentimes you use your category for bidding. So it's really important to make sure that your category isn't set to sale or clearance. it's set to dresses inside the clothing category, and maybe you might add clearance at the end of it, but you want to make sure that you're as granular as possible.
Great, thank you, Brian. Another question in from the audience: how do I control my product titles if there are multiple sellers on Amazon for the very same product?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this is actually something we talked about for Google, but on the Amazon side, whereas Google has the Google Manufacturer Center, what Amazon has is they have an Amazon brand registry. And if you are in control of the brand registry, meaning you are the manufacturer or the brand license owner, you can actually get whitelisted to be in control of the product data the same way that you could for Google Manufacturer Center. And once you do that, you have, again, complete and unfettered access and control over what are the exact titles that show up on Amazon product detail pages. So it's incredibly useful if you are the brand or manufacturer to take control of it, not just for product titles, but also for descriptions, for images, and any of the attributes that might display on those product landing pages.
Got it. Thanks, Brian. So next question from the audience: how can I leverage automated bidding and shopping feeds in my campaigns?
That's a great question, and one that comes up fairly often. So automated bidding should be seen as the evergreen approach of, I expect to hit the return of X based on the shopping campaigns that are included within the folder or the strategy. So those, the day-to-day bid calculation is happening for those objects to hit the target. Fine and well. And then to incorporate the product feed is looking at the other signals. So, we touched on examples of inventory or price point change, where perhaps a change in price has an immediate impact on performance that may take an algorithm a day or two to pick up on, or the weather data. The algorithm, the machine itself doesn't know that you're trying to sell tickets to a baseball game that's about to get rained out, and that's probably why the conversion rate is so low. Or another example could be, you're trying to drive traffic to a product that has very, very limited inventory, or a product is on sale. These are things that the machine would pick up on eventually, but taking that feed and taking that real-time data and using it to assign a more proactive approach to bidding in addition to the reactive approach is where you start to make ends meet.
We have a question here from the audience for Emma in relation to Hero Digital. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you used Marin's ROAS automated bid strategy and Feednomics to drive results for that particular client?
Yes, of course. So a lot of times with shopping campaigns, clients have very specific KPIs that they want to achieve in the retail industry. We were able to leverage, as the question mentions, Marin's bid automation folder for targeted ROAS. And our reps were really great with helping us adjust our settings to make sure that we were gaining the impression share that we were looking to gain for shopping while also hitting our targets.
Okay, good, thanks. Another question in from our audience is about rogue HTML. How big a problem is rogue HTML in feed management, and what can advertisers do about it?
I'll take this one. This is actually a problem we see constantly. It's usually dependent on the e-commerce platform that your product data lives on. Like for Magento, it pretty much affects 100% of the feeds we work with, where we always pull in rogue HTML for the description fields. But in certain cases, you might actually want to use HTML. And this might be if you're sending a feed to eBay, for example, using a custom template. Or if you're sending a feed to Google Manufacturer Center, you might want to include bullet points. So there are a couple of instances where it's really useful to include it, but most of the time, if the channel you're sending it to is not going to render it, you definitely don't want to include that. Otherwise, you might make the user think that they have a virus or something else has gone wrong on their computer.
Really, the idea behind it is you want to set the thresholds. At what point do you want to pause, or what constitutes an underperforming keyword? Those are going to vary by advertiser and vary by your goal. Once those are understood, however, it's simple to either use automated or scheduled reporting functionality to filter for those objects and surface them. either allowing you the opportunity to review and then decide whether to pause or not, or to go ahead and skip straight forward and say, if anything satisfies this criteria, pause it. You could do that in aggregate across publishers and accounts, or if your targets are different from Google versus Facebook, assign different threshold. But long story short, once you understand what you want to do and it's a repeatable practice, it's an obvious interlude to automation and letting tech sort of repeat that action.
Great, thanks for that, AT. Looks like we have our final question from the audience here now. The question is there a role for AI machine learning in feed management?
I'll take this one. It's a really interesting question because usually AI has been reserved for bid management, which is what Marin does amazingly well. But we're actually working on adding elements of AI or machine learning to feed management. So there's not too much more I can share about it at this time, but we have some pretty exciting developments that are going to really make operating and optimizing feeds significantly easier in the future.
Excellent. I think that's all we have time for today. I wanted to say a big thank you to our three speakers, Andrew from Marin, Brian from Feednomics, and Emma from Hero Digital. I think we had some great content on feed management, campaign optimization, and some real-world campaign activity showcasing Hero Digital. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to our speakers, and also thank you very much to everybody who attended this webinar on feed management. And just to let you know that a recording of the webinar will be available within 48 hours. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us, Brian.